by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy. Let's win there.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAP.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so
Exactly.
That's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
We're back. How you doing, George?
Great, Peter. I'm closer to you now. Not all the way there, but closer to Los Angeles.
Separated by a few miles of water, I suppose. I saw a comment. Somebody said that watch out for the dangerous weather. The only thing dangerous I've seen in the weather is that at 11:48 2 nights ago, the County of Los Angeles decided that it was very important, the National Weather Service, that it was very important to wake me up with this very obnoxious, like, blaring sound from my phone. And I have no doubt that several million other people got the same blaring tone at 11:48 at night to let us know that it was raining.
It might have been the BlackBerry ad hoc server from the Capitol that was getting moved yet again. And it loves to send out millions of messages. You know, we're under insurrection. Did it say we were under insurrection, or it was just raining?
Well, my immediate reaction was, darn it, I'm turning this off. And so before I went back to sleep, I turned it off. So if we get hit by the sweet meteor of death, or if there's a tsunami warning, I'm going to miss it.
I heard sound. I hear people saying there's no sound. I think it's all sound and fury at the end of the day. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us, folks.
Yeah. Somebody said, now I did a show yesterday with Guido Preparada, and my volume was low. And so so somebody says George's sound is low. You know what? I might be able to boost this. Hang on. I'll just go do let me see, edit mic settings. I can do this. I can boost here. I'll turn off automatic mic adjustment. Now I've turned George up. So let's see if that works.
Okay. Well, Peter,
I can hear fire engines in the background on George now.
Yeah. Well, Rahm Emanuel, he's always driving, he's always driving some kind of emergency vehicle, for some kind of mass formation psychosis. But I'm actually not far, just right across out that window, looking at the Peter Duke Esports Hall of Fame. The Peter Duke.
I want to set the record straight there, George. Fair enough. I was one of the original guys, but I was the guy at GameWorks who was in charge of organizing the guys who are actually out there in the world doing it. So there is a guy who is, I consider, the father of esports. His name is Frank Kabansky. And I think he's I was trying to find him on Twitter. I thought he was FJ Kamish on Twitter. But Frank Kabansky is a guy who produced something called the Clan Ring mod, which included something called Quake TV, which was the ability to take, just to get a little geeky for 1 second, back in the day when we all had modems, 28.8 and 14.4 modems, streaming video wasn't really possible, except game packets are much smaller than video packets. And so what Frank figured out was that you could stream game packets to a server, and people could connect to the server and they could watch a game a video game being played between two people the same way that you watch it on television. But you could do it with game packets, so you didn't have to do live streaming. And that was Frank's idea. And Frank went out with another guy. I'm trying to remember his name, a young hacker kid in Texas, who's probably a millionaire now, because that's what happened with young hacker kids in Texas in the 90s. And he put together this mod called Quake TV. And so I found Frank, and then I helped Frank develop that. But Frank is he's the godfather of esports.
Well, I took the liberty of doing a little video clip in front of, I mean, this is the worldwide, they used to have worldwide sports in Florida, ABC Worldwide Sports, or Wild World of Sports, wide world of sports. That's hard to say 3 times fast.
Indeed.
But this is esports. This is the wide world of esports. This is Peter Duke's world that's created here in this little 1-minute clip.
Okay, let me see if I can go find it.
And I want Peter to tell the Spielberg moment that creates this world of esports after this clip.
There's actually a video. I think it's kind of long, but I can point people to it. All right, so I think is it your pinned tweet here?
No, go up a little bit. That's me at the Super Bowl. That's me at the Titanic.
I think it's this one.
Yep.
Las Vegas, and a brief shout out to Peter Duke, who I'm going to be doing a show with a little bit later this afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I just wanted to say this is the Esports Arena. This is the Esports Arena. This is the hyper arena for esports, created by one Peter Duke. And the story behind this is one Steven Spielberg walked into his office, and he had a lot of televisions, very large screen televisions. And the story I was told was Mr. Spielberg said, I want this to be a spectator sport. I want this to be an arena sport. And Peter Duke is the guy who helped found it at Sega Genesis, DreamWorks, I believe. I might have that wrong. We'll find out later more at 5 o'clock. But this whole thing is a huge stadium now going up into the heavens, right next to Mandalay Bay, where the NFL Experience is coming. We just had Mahomes and the whole gang. Both teams come in last night for NFL Night here. So there's a lot of excitement around that, but this is going to be a whole new experience in terms of use of AI for play analysis and what-if analysis and all this sorts of things that this has gone into. And again, it's a brilliant distraction from the bigger Super Bowl of American democracy that I like to cover. But I just want to do a quick shout out to the founder, the father of esports, Peter Duke, for Steven Spielberg.
Okay, now what's the real story?
Okay, yeah, and there are probably not a lot of people in esports that would call me the father of anything. Actually, but there is a guy who did a video, and I can bring it up. If you go to dukemedia.com, I've got my own version of a link tree there, and there's a link to it, so I can go find it quickly. But no, the story is that I was working at a place called Sega Gameworks, not Sega Genesis, which was a joint venture between Sega, Universal, and DreamWorks. And I got brought in as the quote-unquote internet guy. So they had something called the internet kiosk. And it turns out that 16-year-old Paul Escandon, his first job anywhere was at GameWorks in Ontario Mills, California. And he was in charge of the internet lounge, which was my first project that I worked on at GameWorks. So we have some kind of synergy there. But they wanted to put internet-based games in, and I was the guy in the room. And so I worked on something called Gameark, and Gameark was 4 seats. So it was a game station that you sat in. I designed all of the controls for it, and I think I'm in the video game. I don't know if it's the Hall of Fame or whatever it is for designing the controls on the arcade version of Quake. And there were 4 seats. You sat in this chair. The controls were at your fingertips like this. And then it had 5.1 surround sound and a 6-foot screen with a projector over your head projecting, so your full peripheral vision was in the screen. So we were doing, the Apple heads-up display, in 1997 that you just sat in. And there were 4 people in Ontario Mills that could play against 4 people in in Grapevine, Texas. But the thing that was like the big deal was that we did live streaming video of the players' faces along the bottom of the screen, so you could see the other 7 people that you were playing with while you were playing, and so you could see the other 3 people in your city, and then the 4 people you're playing against in the other city, and you could talk to them. So that was a revolutionary thing in 1997. I think it cost about $500,000 to build. Just the video conferencing component of it, and that was GTE that was our partner, and of course they got busted later. You and Mark Kulak, I think, have talked about GTE. A lot of the people who were involved in that GameWorks video project, I think, got caught up in that GTE scandal also. But what happened was GameWorks was a place, their tagline, the worst tagline. I mean, John Shea, the guy who was the head of marketing, came in late, and he had come over from MTV. He had been the head of marketing for MTV, and he came into GameWorks, and he looked at all of the things that we were doing, and he came up with this tagline, which was everything good all at once. And I have to tell you, everything good all at once, it's not so good. You need to, it's kind of like a recipe, right? You need to know when to you're putting too much sugar in, right, into the cake. Otherwise, it doesn't wind up being a cake. So so what happened was Spielberg comes in one day, and we have all of these video monitors. There's a balcony area around the GameWorks, and hanging off of the edge of the balcony, not unlike a sports bar, there's dozens, if not hundreds of giant, huge video monitors. And this is back in the day when we didn't have flat screens. Like, these were giant, things that were attached to the wall. And Spielberg said, what are you going to put in those? And my boss said, we were going to run music videos. And he said, no, you're not. And that was like the end of the conversation. And he said, well, what do you suggest that we put in there? And he goes, you need to take the games that are down here, and you need to make them watchable. You need people to be able to watch the games that they're playing down here. And so there was, all of the games in the arcade were arcade games. And while there were ways that you could work with Sega or any of the major arcade manufacturers in order to create that kind of functionality, because all of those things are kind of hardware-driven platforms, it would take a long time to get those things to market. But Quake, the game that I was in charge of, I could get done almost immediately. And so I reached out to this guy, Frank Kabansky, who is in Texas, and we put together, we modified the software that he created, and we got that thing up and running in a few weeks. First we got it running on our stage. I was on a soundstage that sadly I don't think exists anymore at Universal Studios Stage 35. It was an old sitcom set that had been converted into our office. And so that's the story of how the beginnings of esports were started. But it was certainly, I was the guy who was out there sourcing talent. I wasn't the talent.
Yeah, so I had a lot of the story correct. So I
Yes.
got the Sega Genesis wrong, because I know Genesis was it the gaming console? Anyway, I don't remember.
Yeah, well, they had platforms. And Sega's a big company. They, a lot of people don't know this. I think that when I worked there, they had like 700 arcades in Japan. So they not only made the games, but they had the locations also.
Yeah, the real physical locations. So, and that leads us into, speaking of games and esports, I guess this would be called G Sports, which is like government games that we play. I don't know.
Well, I thought that it was interesting because you were talking about the Doritos bowl and stuff. And I've already, I don't know if you've noticed, but at the World Economic Forum last week, Yuval Harari announced that Donald Trump was going to become the president again. So that, and George Soros' son. So that seems to be fait accompli as far as they're concerned. And I've noticed with all of the combination of Taylor Swift becoming a Politico and becoming the girlfriend of a Kansas City football player that I'm predicting right here, right now. And I know that I'm not alone, and I know that I'm not the first one to do this, that the Kansas City Chiefs will win the Super Bowl, and they will win the Super Bowl because of Taylor Swift.
Well, I was with you right up until the end. I think they're going to win because of Mahomes, but that's just me. I like quarterbacks that can run and throw and make plays. But you may be right. You may be right. I think the Taylor Swift thing is unfortunately a way of trying to bring in people that aren't really sports people and sort of kind of do a mind meld with country music or whatever that thing she does with sports and bring in the Swifties into the game. I don't know if they need that or not, but Toby Keith died today, I guess.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, from stomach cancer, I guess. So I guess that's going to, a lot of the people who normally go to these types of games.
Right. Does that mean that we'll put a boot in your ass? It's the American way for the next week?
I think it means we're not going to see him, and he's not going to be a big thing at the big game over here, like we thought he might have been, or his songs during Trump rallies for the whole year coming up. He has a lot of those patriotic, in-your-face songs, like you mentioned.
Right.
So he's out, and Swifty is in, and I think this is I'm not saying this is in any way contrived at all. But I do think you're going to see a lot more Taylor Swift where you would have seen Toby Keith. But I do think there is going to be a week of reverence, but then you're going to see Taylor Swift being kind of moved in. And then she's going to be dangled like, all the Swifties will vote over here. If I say, here's the Swifties will vote over here. If I say, and we're the difference maker, we're the kingmaker, and a lot of other things. Like Robert F. Kennedy wouldn't be the kingmaker. It's going to be Taylor Swift. But America will probably believe it. And that's why I say this Super Bowl is about Doritos or democracy. And I know we don't have a clear democracy. I know it's a republic, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just saying it doesn't rhyme with republic, Doritos. And I'm looking right at the Luxor Hotel, which is the whole triangle. Peter, you like the triangles.
Yeah.
The cubes, the pyramids. The whole thing's Doritos. Nowhere on there will you see any thing about Trump, assassination, Trump, taken out by the Supreme Court, Trump taken out by, all these DC courts. Nothing. It's Doritos.
Well, I have another GameWorks story.
Have that?
Okay, because you mentioned Doritos. Okay, so Coca-Cola was a major sponsor of GameWorks. I think that when I was working there, we signed a $77 million. GameWorks was supposed to open 100 locations in 5 years. We opened 22 in the first 2 years. And then all the mojo ran out. But when we got that contract, GameWorks in Las Vegas, I don't know if it's still in the same building. I think it might be, but GameWorks in Las Vegas was in a building that was the Coca-Cola building. And there was a giant Coca-Cola bottle like on the front of the building, I think. And we were building a climbing rock that was physically big, an indoor climbing rock. So it had all these arcade games, but in the middle was this auto belaying climbing rock where you could put on a harness and it had the counterweight and you could climb all the way up to the top and you wouldn't have to be afraid of falling or anything. But it was taller than the Coke bottle in Coke's building, and Coke did not like this thing being bigger than their Coke bottle in their own building in Las Vegas. And so we had an emergency design meeting, and this is like full like Disney Imagineering. Again, this isn't Disney, but all the people I worked with were Disney Imagineers. And this is like a full Disney Imagineering, full court press. My boss called us all in and he said, we need to retheme this thing tonight for a meeting tomorrow morning with Coca-Cola in Atlanta. Okay. This is at like 4:30 in the afternoon. Right. And so we have this emergency brainstorming session, and Coca-Cola had a product that was a competitor to Mountain Dew that was called Surge. And so the idea that we came up with very quickly was that we were going to paint the climbing rock green, like fluorescent green, and we were going to retheme it as Surge Rock. And
not bad on the spur of the moment.
No, it was pretty good. And so the artists are all drawing rock climbers climbing up Surge Rock and everything. And these guys are great. They could draw as fast as you could talk. They're just fantastic. But my job was that they came up with this idea that every time you climbed up a different route on Surge Rock, you would get a stamp in a little thing that looked like a passport that was foil stamped with this Coca-Cola logo on it. And every time you stamped it, so I had to have overnight, before they got on the plane to go to Atlanta the next morning, okay, I had to get a leatherette passport made that was themed with the Coca-Cola Surge, that was rubber stamped with rubber stamps. So I had to get 4 rubber stamps made, and then I had to get a leatherette foil stamped thing made. So I kept a print shop that made those things in Los Angeles open all night. Like, I paid them to not go home that night.
Wow.
And we sent messengers and did the whole thing. We put this whole package together. My boss got on the plane. He flew to Atlanta. He made the whole presentation, and we saved the climbing rock. It became Surge Rock, and that's the story of Surge Rock.
I love it. There was the Coke bottle over here across the street at New York for a while, because they have that little mini Times Square on the front of their thing. But I don't know if it's still there or not. But now I'm going to start, parlaying around Surge Rock, telling the story.
I don't know if it's still there.
An insider, I mean, why not? So Dave Underdown saying that it's also something that David Petraeus used in a new thing for keeping the war in Afghanistan going on interminably. I think he also did a surge in Iraq as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So anyway, that was one of those things. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that where your basically money was no object at that point. Like, I think it cost us $3,000 or $4,000 to keep the print shop open, and make them stay there and wait to do something that they would normally charge, $40 or $50 to do.
I remember being in Australia, being asked to be the speaker because one of the speakers got sick and didn't get on the plane and come to Australia for Sun. Mm-hmm. And the VP of marketing, this is the big launch, for the country. It's not as big as the US, but he said, could you do this part? And here's the script. And I did it. And, oh man, everyone was so nervous and everything. I thought I did fine.
I'm sure you killed it, George.
Well, I put on my Australian accent. Everybody thought I was Australian just for a little bit. And I said, no, I'm just kidding. I'm American. But good afternoon, Australians. That's how I opened the thing. It was funny. It was good.
Good day.
I had
good day.
Yeah. I had the one that wasn't very exciting. I had the new Motorola model, and there was a new Spark model that everybody wanted to hear about. So they wanted to get me off stage quick anyway. But I've never had this kind of thing where, like it's an account that's $1 million account, and you're going to lose it if you don't do some incredible gyrations that night, which I think is pretty creative. But actually, I like the idea of Surge Rock the more I'm thinking about it. And I like the idea of the passports, because what are you going to do with a Coke bottle? You can't climb the Coke bottle. It's not interactive.
Well, right. It was something, and that was the problem that it was designed to solve. And, I was talking to somebody yesterday about building a website. And if you go to my Duke Media version of Linktree, you can click on an article that I wrote called "The 7 Things That You Need to Know Before You Ever Do a Design Project." And so the problem that we were trying to solve was, how do we get Coca-Cola to not kill this wall? right? And
Yeah.
the way that we did it is that we branded every time you climbed up this rock, you got a little piece of Coca-Cola branding right in your hand, with a little Coca-Cola stamp. And
It's a cool idea. I mean,
yeah.
I like anything like that if it's not too extensive, like if it doesn't have 28 different paths. If somebody could do it in a day, if they applied themselves and then they're walking out with a full thing.
Well, the belaying system was pretty sophisticated. I think it was the first automatic belaying system. So basically, it would keep enough tension on you so that if you fell, it would know. It had some kind of flywheel thing. It would know you were falling, right? But it would keep the tension on you as you went up. But if you got halfway up and you decided that you didn't want to climb anymore, you could push off and it would just let you down. So it was actually a really, really cool system. It was one of the most fun things there.
Yeah. I mean, I think any of those things, where it's interactive and actually using muscles, where kids, rather than just their fingers, is good for parents and, all that good stuff. So it would be, like the old football games at this, they still might do it. It used to be punt, pass, and kick.
Mm-hmm.
You try to kick it as far as you can. You could throw it as far as you can and as accurately as you can. And then, with the punt, pass, and kick, right? Kick field goals too, which is hard. So, I mean, that is what the NFL used to have. And I see this thing going now toward, you're going to have Mahomes' camera on, his eye when he's the quarterback. And then you're going to have the new Apple Pro Vision, and as his head turns, you're looking at the receivers and you're thinking, Mahomes. And now you can override the quarterback. You can do the motion like this with the hand motion. Apparently this gesture control is really good now. So it'll now tell you if you would have completed that pass, if that guy was open enough. You see where this is going is now, at least maybe, don't get too close to the Doritos bowl when you're doing your hand motions because you knock the Doritos over. But you at least might make these couch potato games now less couch potato-y. I don't know.
Right. Well, I guess there's more. I read someplace that there are more sports injuries on Super Bowl Sunday than any day of the year. And
go out and play at halftime?
And I think there are less people who are actual athletes playing sports on Super Bowl Sunday than any other day of the year. So, it's all of these people who decide at halftime that they're going to go out and throw the ball around, and something happens.
I remember we used to play in the street, and parked cars were your enemy, and mirrors were really your enemy. Especially when you're trying to catch something over your shoulder like this, and you're trying to run, and there's a guy trying to knock it. It's fraught with disaster. Plus, you're playing on asphalt; it's not AstroTurf. It's danger.
So back in the day when I was a fashion photographer, my favorite male models that I ever worked with were the guys that I called accidental models. Like they didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I want to be a model." This is just not what they did. St. John Smith and his brother Andrew, they were volleyball players, and Bruce Weber showed up at the volleyball court that you play at, George, in Santa Monica one day, and asked them if they wanted to be in GQ, and that was like how the beginning of their career started. And I have another friend who was a professional football player. He was college All-American at Appalachia State University, and I believe that I think I'm correct here, but I believe that he led his team to beat Boston College the year that Appalachia State played Boston, which had never happened. So we could probably look it up and find out whether or not I've got that right or not. But he got picked up off the street by an agent and got sent down to the Caribbean. So basically what happened was he got drafted by the World Football League. You remember the World Football League.
Donald Trump.
And yeah, I think it might have been Donald Trump's team.
Yep.
And before he could get to training camp, they went bankrupt. And so he went to the Patriots for a walk-on tryout because he thought, well, maybe I'll wind up being the third string quarterback on the Patriots or something, but it's better than not working this year. And he said on the first snap in his tryout, the center and the guard moved apart, and the middle linebacker drove him halfway to China on the first snap. And he got up and he said, "What the F did you do that for?" And they said, "To see if you would get up." So that was the first snap, right? And he said that he had a bruise on his sternum for about 3 weeks after that. But he got done with training camp, and they said, "We'll let you know in a week." And so he went to New York, and he was walking down the street, and an agent from a modeling agency came up to him and asked him if he was a model, and he said no, and asked him if he could take a Polaroid of him. And then he wrote his phone number down on the Polaroid, and a couple of days later, he asked him if he wanted to go to the Caribbean for a week with Kelly Emberg, who is a friend of mine, and at that time was the most famous model in the world. She was on the cover of Vogue dozens of times. So he was weighing his relationship with the front line of the Boston Patriots, and then the idea of going and spending a week with this beautiful model in the Caribbean. So football lost. That was the end of that.
Wow, talk about a difference in physicality and just in getting beat up and bruised and all that. I mean, football is tough sport. Basketball is tough enough.
But here's the punchline. Phil calls me up one day, and he goes, this happened several times, but he calls me up one day and he goes, "Hey Duke, let's go throw the ball around. Let's go to the beach. Let's go throw the ball around." And it's like, he's my friend. I said, okay, we would go to the beach, but you have to understand, it's kind of like throwing the ball around with John Elway. Like catching the ball, if you can catch it, if you can get your hands on it, and he kept telling me, he said, you got to put your body, you got to use your body to take the ball in, it's coming. I caught about 4 or 5 passes. He blew the fingertips off my hands. Okay. And I not unlike Phil, also had a bruise on my sternum from the football hitting me.
Right.
When I would catch the football.
There was a guy named Bobby Douglas for the Chicago Bears that used to, throw strawberries through the side of a battleship. I mean, he would zing it in there. And pro football, I had a couple of guys I played basketball with played pro football. And they were just great athletes. And the number one way to stay around in NFL football is don't get hit too much.
Right.
There was a guy named Duerson I played against in Muncie Central, and he hit me a couple of times. He played all pro. He was the hardest hitter as far as the defensive secondary. So he was just a guy who loved to hit people. And his favorite thing was to hear air come out of people like that. Yeah, that was a fun night against Muncie Central. But can you believe, Peter, we lived in a country where you couldn't throw a football on the beach. We actually went down to a beach at one of our charrettes.
Yeah.
And the COVID restrictions wouldn't let you throw a football on the beach. Now, you know who you're throwing it to, right? And they don't have COVID, and you don't have COVID. You're not throwing it to strangers and trying to get a game going or anything. But we lived in that. That all happened in America. And so
maybe we can find the video of the Los Angeles County, Jessica. Maybe we can find the video of the Los Angeles County Lifeguards arresting the guy on the paddleboard at Malibu Pier.
Well, I did a video about at the Titanic exhibit here, and that's at the Luxor, about how we didn't have an inquiry. We had a much more extensive look into the Titanic, 94 witnesses, 25,000 questions. It ran for 60 days, something like that, for 500 lost souls. And admittedly, it was something that should have been looked into. They came up with great ideas like, hey, we should have searchlights like we have on other ships. We should have, binoculars for the guys, like we do on the other ships. But here is the thing we never had, which is a coronavirus inquiry. Here we go.
actually of the Titanic ballroom. So this is by far the most interesting part of the exhibit. Interesting that the inquiry has 94 witnesses, 25,000 questions, but the COVID inquiry has had 0 witnesses, 0 questions. You'll see the number of witnesses, 94 in the inquiry, actually, of the type.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show you how effective Congress is now, right? I mean, they have one job, pass the budget. They haven't done that since 2008. And it seems like all of the inquiries that they do are really, you know, it's like I'm reminded of the Trey Gowdy, you know, speeches, you know, where he got everybody's blood boiling, but nothing ever happened. And that seems to be, we have a legal system, but we don't really have a justice system.
Yeah, well, Trey Gowdy, I did a fairly good Trey Gowdy imitation once upon a time when he was, and it's better because when he's in Congress, I think he got out of the Congress just because of my imitation, because it was pretty good, and it was like, do I really sound like that? You know,
I think he got out of Congress because when you're a congressman, you're only there for 2 years, so you can pretty much get away with saying whatever you want and not doing anything, and then leaving and saying, "Well, I tried." You know, and now I'm on the board of directors at Fox News with,
exactly.
You know, it's like
Jason Chaffetz and him
right.
both walked into nice plush contracts at Fox. So I would do the same thing. And again, Fox is the thing. The most dangerous thing you do during the day is you put in your earpiece. You know, it's good work if you can get it. And Congress is not like that. You're always taking heat from various constituents and so forth. So I don't know if you have the wakeboarder, I'd like to see that because.
All right, let's see if we can pull it up here. Let's see if we got this.
We didn't ask a question. Yeah, we had a whole crowd us. We didn't ask a question. He always had a breathy finish to his thing. And I miss Trey Gotti.
All right, so let me see if this works. When I originally saw it, I saw. Oh, I think this is it. Here we go. I do think this is it.
Out. Sheriff's on the beach. But sheriff boat's coming now. This might be our first
I have to tell you that my best friend at the time was an LA County guard for like over 20 years. And I said, what was going on? He goes, I told these guys I wasn't going to have anything to do with anything like this.
Be the first arrest made for surfing, documented in history. Look at now, he's trying to boat, dude. High speed pursuit. What is he trying to do? Oh man, you can't even make this up. This guy's coming in. Let's see the highway pursuit. Oh my God, look at this.
These are LA County Lifeguards, LA County's finest.
He cut him off. Throw the tacks down. Pop the tires. Oh my God. Spray him with a hose.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a real man. That's a real public servant.
That's a really dangerous. Flipping the engines back at him. Like, wow, that's really super dangerous.
Let's see. I haven't seen this one. Yeah, I want these guys' names. If they don't get pensions, I'm okay.
Well, it's a lot of firepower. I mean, wow, they arrested him.
Yeah. These lifeguards and cops are bastards. No different than Nazis.
That's pretty crazy. Well, Peter, speaking of Nazis, I did watch a little bit of your thing yesterday with Mr. Preparada and this whole idea that there's
Congratulations on pronouncing his name correctly. I have a harder time.
Can you imagine, a guy born in, I think it's Boston or wherever, and then he goes over and lives in Rome, and now he's with a name like Preparada? I mean, what a great name.
He taught math at Los Angeles. Like, this guy is, well, first of all, he wrote this book, Conjuring Hitler. And he made the mistake of citing David Irving in the book, which cost him his job as a professor at the University of Washington.
Wow.
He got fired. But the main reason that he got fired, and I was talking to him yesterday because he also has a book on terrorism, I think.
The tyranny book. Yeah.
The Tyranny book, and it's published by McMillan. And I'm working on a video right now. I should have it done in the next week or so. But I've taken, Carol Quigley famously did an interview with a guy named Rudy Maxa, who was writing for the Washington Post, because Quigley was a famous Georgetown professor, and he found out that all kinds of shenanigans had gone on after his book Tragedy and Hope got published. Namely, it was only going to ever go into another publishing second edition if it sold more than 2,000 copies. And within a couple of weeks of it becoming published, McMillan was taken over by a holding company, which was something Loeb. Oh, was it Rhodes? The holding company was called Rhodes and Loeb. I'm not. So Rhodes and Loeb Holding took control of McMillan Publishing, and the guy who signed the contract with him fell out of the window of his 9th floor apartment in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. Can't make this up, right? And Carol Quigley is still scratching his head going, I don't know what's happening. But basically, for 20 years, McMillan told him that that book never sold more than 2,000 copies. And what happened was that it was so popular amongst the conspiracy community that was being driven by the John Birch Society at that time, that somebody went to the expense of doing a photo replication of the entire book, a perfect copy of it, and they were selling it to bookstores all over the United States because McMillan said that it was out of print. So McMillan was telling the bookstores that it was out of print, and they were telling Quigley that it hadn't sold 2,000 copies. And oh yeah, they destroyed the plates to the book, so it never could be reprinted again by them. And Quigley only found this out. The book was published in 1966. Quigley only found this out around 1974. And so he did this famous article. I'm sorry, he did a famous interview with this guy, Rudy Maxa, from the Washington Post, where he's telling Maxa all of this stuff. And the recording was kind of like, it was probably a crappy cassette recorder, 1974. It might have been like one of those Olympus Pearl quarters or something that they had back in the day. But the audio quality isn't great. And recently I discovered that because of AI, Adobe Premiere will actually automatically generate subtitles. And it makes it a lot easier to watch if you got subtitles. And what I did, he starts mentioning all these people, Cecil Rhodes and Milner, and all of the other roundtable guys. And so one of the things that I did is I just put their picture up as he's talking about them, so that you have a face and recognition, and you can kind of put a timeline together.
This is at the Duke Report, this video?
I'm almost done with it. It should be done in the next week. But the reason I'm telling you the story is because Preparada's book, which is a college textbook, is also McMillan. And he's having all kinds of problems because it's a $68 book. And so, and I said to him, I said, have you ever heard the Quigley interview? And I assumed that he had, because he wrote the part of the way that I discovered Preparada, besides the Conjuring Hitler book, is that he wrote the afterword to the book New World Order by Sean Stone. And so so he wrote the afterword. The foreword to that book was written by Richard Grove. And I figure Preparado was probably friends with Richard Grove and knew the story of Quigley and McMillan. But when I talked to him yesterday, he had never heard the story before. So I've got to quickly finish the video so that people can see it. But yeah, so long story short, Quigley publishes the book. Within a couple of weeks, Rhodes and Loeb Holding Company take control of McMillan. The plates get destroyed. Quigley starts getting told that nobody's buying it. Bookstores get told that it's out of print, and he doesn't find this out for decades. And when he does find out, the guy who had written the contract with him at McMillan jumps out of his 9th-story window on the Upper East Side.
Well, he's an interesting guy. Preparato's an interesting guy. I saw that Lady Jessica put in the chat that he wrote a book on Jesus, which is kind of what I call the alternative Vatican view of Jesus. So it was an interesting book. But
well, he's got this here. I've got a lot of them here. This is I haven't read that. This is the one in the house that I haven't read yet. The political scripting of Jesus, utilizing the Savior's story to exercise power today. So that's that one.
Yeah, and the Conjuring Hitler book is interesting because what I believe is the thesis is that the Anglo-American Axis kind of supported as a third line. Yeah, that book, Conjuring Hitler, that they had help, both the Rothschild interests and the Rockefeller interests.
Right.
Had a lot to gain, especially in the oil business and so forth, and the conquering and getting the gold and trying out new technologies that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds were working on. And I think there's a lot of support to that story. With you had mentioned, the map. I can't remember the name of the guy for this map.
Mackinder
map. Yeah, I saw this.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so and there's a couple of other maps too that are really interesting here too. So this is the Halford Mackinder map of the world, and it's interesting how they always say geography is destiny or geography is history, and if you understand that the white parts of this map are water, and that's the part that Britain considers to be their domain, then the biggest threat is what Mackinder referred to as the world island, which is the Eurasian continent. So basically everything from Portugal there to Sarah Palin's neighborhood, Kamchatka. But the key to the whole thing is to make sure that the Russians and the Europeans never shake hands. They never get together. They never find a way to work together, because if they do, it will be the end of the Anglo hegemony. But where it starts to get interesting, if you go from map to map, this is a different way of looking at the world. And if you include Africa in the world island, with its connection through Egypt, then it puts Ukraine and Israel in the middle of this giant island thing, and so it puts them in the control position. So this is a different way of looking at the same information. And again, when you look at maps this way and then you compare them to what's going on with the news, then things start to make a lot more sense. But go on.
My takeaway, though, from all this is that Rhodes, had that one picture that I put in my treatment of the book, Less Tragedy, More Hope, which is he's got a 1 foot in Cairo and he's got the other foot in Cape Town. Mm-hmm. And they're going to build this railroad, the Cairo to Cape Town Railroad. And then the whole idea of Africa being 40 times the size of Texas and having more resources than 40 Texases, and the idea that the person who puts the railroad across is going to get that, right? And that's what makes Africa so important, and that's what makes the round table so important. And really everything else in the book, and having read the book, and it's a big book, a lot of
which book?
The Less Tragedy, More Hope.
Right.
The real takeaway is the real juice of the book, in my opinion, is the idea of what you're saying here is taking that nice big broad step away from this heartland of this top when worrying about Russia too much, and now moving it to Africa, because at that point you were still, the Suez Canal was a big Rothschild investment, but a lot of traffic was still going around the Cape of Good Hope, and that was going to be to control this outer insular crescent, I guess you're calling it. And that's
what Mackinder called it. Yeah,
that's what Mackinder called it. Yeah, and I think Preparada does a lot of the underpinning and a lot of the grunt work, of citations to show that these investments were made by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and they did create. They were partners in this rise of Hitler.
Yeah, well, not only that, but the big question that book answered for me that I was kind of struggling for, and Quigley kind of answered it, and Sutton kind of answered it, but Preparata really kind of tied it all together. And that it's this: why would Hitler make a non-aggression pact with? First of all, how did Hitler come into power? Okay. And then why did he make a non-aggression pact with Stalin, who was so shocked when Hitler turned around and attacked him that he didn't actually react for a few days after the Nazis started their offensive into Belarus? And I didn't really understand the psychology of that, and what Preparata does a fantastic job of doing in this little book, which is the annotated. I'm sorry, the abridged version of Conjuring Hitler. What he does such a great job of doing is showing how the British manipulated Hitler into believing that they were his big supporters until he was fully committed to doing something against. He was fully facilitated to be able to attack Russia, and then they gradually knocked the blocks out from underneath him, and forced him into a situation where he had to fight on two fronts. And unless you understand all the machinations of Lord Halifax and how the Round Table members were manipulating all of that stuff, his behavior is like a madman, right? They called him a madman. They don't understand that the British basically said, you can have Austria, you can have Czechoslovakia, you can have the Sudetenland, you can have the Rhineland, you can have them. Like your idea of having this German empire, and he had this idea going back to the Mackinder map, for a minute. Like he had this idea that he was going to be in control of the world island, and then he was going to be partners with the British, and between his control of the world island and their control of the oceans, that between the two empires, they could control the whole planet. So he was a little bit caught off guard when that didn't wind up happening. He was unprepared for that part. But Preparata also pointed out that we're it looks like we're coming really close to the George Orwell map of the world at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, disputed in the middle with Africa and the Middle East, CENTCOM area, basically. Interesting. That's a good map. I've never seen that one before.
Wikipedia,
good. Yeah,
this is the George Orwell map of the world. So,
yeah. So for people who want the abridged version, because the big version, Conjuring Hitler, is $32, and they don't have an audio and they don't have a Kindle, the abridged version that you mentioned is...
Yes, Incubation of Nazism. And one of the things that I talked to Guido about yesterday is that this is 50 Australian dollars in Australia. And he said that should not be. So he wrote it down. And so for our followers who follow us in Australia... keep checking Amazon, because I think that he's going to figure out what went wrong there and make sure that it's I think this book is like $15 in the United States. So
I think there's an active market for Kindle, and it's easy once you do the Kindle publisher. Once you get it in for the printed, you can easily convert it to Kindle. Now it cuts into your sales of the paperbacks, but I think he would get a lot of sales for $12, $13 for the Kindle.
Yeah, but I shouldn't say but. What I was going to say is, George, this guy, I think he's moved 8 times in 12 years or something like that, and he's still pumped out all of these books, and he's doing all of this stuff by himself, as far as I can tell. So, we just need to pray that he gets it together, because I think that and he does want to do all of the things that you're talking about. So.
Yeah, well, that's an easy one because I've been down that road. So, and you've gone down that road now. So,
yep.
Hopefully we can help him on that. But I mean, we want to promote. We're obviously talking about it again the next day to help promote sales of the book. So, we definitely want to sell as many as possible.
But helping him is great. But actually understanding what actually happened there is really important, because when you understand that World War II was orchestrated, that World War I was orchestrated, World War II is orchestrated. We're seeing it going on now. And I read an article, I think I've talked about this on the show before, but one of the things that they're having a hard time with is things like Twitter, X, and Facebook have these translation buttons underneath things in foreign languages. And you can see what people are saying in other countries, and you can translate things in real time. And that's the powers that be, the Tower of Babel effect, has been to always kind of keep people in their camps based on their languages, based on their ability to understand language. And so you might hear stories in English that you would never hear in German or never hear in Hebrew, and vice versa. And that is all kind of going out the window right now, which means that it's very difficult for them to put genies back in the bottles at this point.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of my footnoting, and I go back over and over books in Kindle. So I'm just saying it from a selfish point of view. When people do a lot of research, they do a lot of footnoting and so forth. It's really great to have a book like that in Kindle, because I'm moving like he does, all the time. So
yep,
a moving target's harder to hit. So there you go. I didn't have a lot of other agenda items, other than the Super Bowl agenda. I went down to the Super Bowl. I talked about this just in the news. We probably should cover it for 2 minutes before comments. If you still believe in things called politics, there is.
I believe in politics. I just don't think it's real. I think
okay.
It's,
well, that's kind of like saying I don't.
I believe in Days of Our Lives, It's like,
okay, yeah. I believe it's either fake or real. Yes, I believe those are the two choices. Yes. There's, just for the news, folks, there are 3 moves afoot to nullify Trump's candidacy. One is in the Washington court system with Tanya Chutkan, and she is the insurrection case. Trump lost the appeal, so he now is Citizen Trump, just like Citizen Kane. He doesn't have any special presidential immunity that any other citizen doesn't have, so they've removed that. And now I say he needs to get Dershowitz and not, the lawyer he's got, who's never done that kind of case before. I'd rather have the guy who won for me in the impeachment hearings, be my guy. But anyway, I say Trump should appeal in the en banc, which is a 9-judge court. But I believe that Chutkan will reassemble that April, May. She'll restart the trial. So we're still full on in Michigan on the 24th to make the case for Trump. We believe we have the exculpatory evidence that shows it was Joe Biggs going over 3 bike racks and not Donald Trump. Did not order those 3 bike racks to be taken. On the second one is the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court is taking the case that Trump should be held. Basically, they'll be the final arbiters of if Trump has any kind of presidential protections at all. And they'll be deciding basically if he's nullified on all 50 ballots, if he committed insurrection. They're comparing him to Jefferson Davis, 620,000 people killed, somebody who's raised armies in 11 different states, marched armies at northern cities, fired on
borrowed millions of dollars from Barings Bank.
English bankers, foreign treason. I mean, everything you can think of. 625,000 deaths on the low end estimate, and that's being compared to Joe Biggs with the 3 bicycle gates. Hard to believe, and no one's been charged. So Matt Gaetz today had a press conference. He's got a bill to say, hey, this isn't, Trump shouldn't be held for treason. 60 members of the House signed it, and then the other thing going is Thomas Massie is trying to get the Secret Service text messages. My add to that is the server, which actually I've been talking about for 7 years, is called the BlackBerry ad hoc server, and that's the thing that they need to subpoena, both for the Biden BlackBerries and for the House. So that's kind of your news wrap up of the various Trump takedowns that are going right now, and we're following it as close as we can.
Yeah, I haven't been following it, so thank you for that.
People are talking about Dershowitz's relationship to Jeff Epstein, and he was Jeff Epstein's lawyer and all these other things. Put it this way, when you're about ready to go to jail for 10 to 20 years for insurrection, you don't want to know anything about your lawyer other than the fact, is he going to win or not? Right? He already stopped the impeachment for Trump once. He's a Harvard professor where a lot of these law clerks, people that were clerk for him and took his courses, ended up becoming appellate judges and become members of the Supreme Court. So it's a lot of gravitas for somebody to be advocating in your favor. I talked about Jay Sekulow. I talked about a lot of other attorneys. So I'm not bought in that it has to be Dershowitz. I just want somebody who's got the gravitas in front of the court to argue in front of the Supreme Court. And if somebody has a better suggestion, then by all means, go for it.
Well, I like to work backwards from the effect that I think that they're going for. So if one assumes that there is no way that the power elite are interested in ever having Donald Trump sworn in as president, then you're left with a few different options. And if you also understand that the end game here is the dissolution of the nation state of the United States of America, then ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a Hegelian dialectic that winds up starting, even if it's not a real civil war, something that has the appearance, at least as far as the media is concerned and the general public who are still hypnotized by the media, that has the general appearance of a civil war, and the United States not being able to maintain its integral functions as a government, at which point you would bring in the blue helmets, right? You would bring in help from overseas. You'd bring in NATO to try to help the United States sort this out. It's 3 o'clock, it's 3:05. Nicholas Berggruen, I got invited to a conference call, a Zoom call that Nicholas Berggruen's Berggruен Institute is doing right now. And I've got other people that are recording it. I think Lauren Brown is going to monitor it for us. They're discussing moving forward with a new government in California. Well, you don't get a new government in California unless you kind of unravel yourself from the United States of America. And so I think that there is this kind of unraveling of the United States of America as a sovereign entity going on. And so why am I talking about this? Because if Donald, they may want Donald Trump in jail, because that will be the catalyst for kicking off the insurrection. That might be the bridge too far, the red line, the straw that broke the camel's back. Either that or taking him out, a la John F. Kennedy. But I don't actually see a scenario where Donald Trump is ever president again. He had the power. He had the ring. He had the ring of power for 4 years. He could have gone Roosevelt on them. He could have gone FDR. You know, he could have declared the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs enemy combatants. He could have sent the FTC and the Security and Exchange Commission in to audit all of the big banks, and none of them would have met the minimum requirements, and he could have nationalized the banks. He could have done a lot of, Roosevelt style stuff that almost got Roosevelt killed a couple of times. And I think Mark Kulak is probably correct that that Roosevelt was eventually assassinated because the bankers couldn't see him making it past World War II and continuing what he was doing to them before World War II. So I don't see Donald Trump being president again, meaning, and so I don't even look at these trials as more than the Hegelian setup for whatever the next thing is that they want to do. And I'm sorry for all those people who support Donald Trump. I supported Donald Trump. I was there on January 6th. He had 4 years to get it done, and he didn't do it. So I don't know what you think about that, George.
Yeah, and I see people in the chat.
Wait, hang. I don't know.
My audio still there?
Yeah, somehow your Twitter automatically started.
I see people in the chat say that Trump is the hill to die on. That's not the hill to die on. The Constitution is the hill to die on. So the only reason
I don't even believe that. I believe the preamble of the Constitution is the hill to die on.
Right, and the basic human Bill of Rights. No, I'm just saying that. But
to provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty for ours and our posterity, because the rest of it has gotten us to where we are now. And if you understand,
Bill of Rights, you would leave out the Bill of Rights, or you would leave that in.
The Bill of Rights, yeah, you can keep the Bill of Rights.
Okay,
yeah.
We're in agreement then.
Okay,
yeah, I'm just saying that if it was Joe Biden with the same situation, and they were saying Joe Biden led an insurrection, and Jefferson David's the historical example, I'd be fighting the same battle.
Mm-hmm.
So it has nothing, for me, it has nothing to do with Trump. Nothing. It's all about the Constitution, and it's worth fighting for as long as we think it's real. If it's not real, then California should.
The problem with the Constitution is that they used the Constitution, and that's in my book. That's in Stealth Power and the Illusion of Democracy. They used the Constitution. They put constitutions in place because they understand, and they really, really like democracy more than they like constitutions, and they like constitutional democracies. Because what they can do is they can control the media and they control the politicians in order to change the laws and get the social proof. People think, oh, we voted for this, so this is what we deserve. There's that old cliche, you get the government that you deserve. I don't believe that's true. And unfortunately, the Constitution, the way that it is been constructed right now, has been used as a weapon. Recently, I think it was Guido that was talking on another podcast where he said something, and I totally agree with him at this point, is that there is no deep state. There is the state. There's the constitutional state that exists, and it's the state. So the state that's doing whatever it's doing to Donald Trump, the state that threw your cases out, that's the state. And the imaginary part is the deep state is real. Okay, the constitutional freedom-loving state is the imaginary part. That's the Santa Claus part. And I don't believe there is a deep state. I believe that the Constitution is working exactly the way that it was set up to use. I think that Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and George Washington thought that they were clever enough, and Patrick Henry, to put in those amendments, the Bill of Rights, like you said, in order to defeat what they knew the ultimate goal was of the people who separated the American colonies from Great Britain and set up the United States in the first place. And I'm sorry if that kind of bursts other people's bubbles, but I think that's really where we are.
Well, that's a good assessment, and I think I know you got another call, and so I think that's a good placeholder. I just want to put a quick plug in. Tomorrow I'm back.
Oh, I didn't have a call. That was you. That was your Twitter feed that was going. But
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, what I want to say is we're going to pick up the neighborhood news. I've been doing these Substacks, Peter, because a lot of people want to. They want to say, okay, where are the receipts? I heard the space. Sounds good, but where are the receipts? And that's why I do the Substack. So it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly. But it's hard to do the writing and then do the video shows and then also do the Substacks and then also write books, because I want to get back to the book writing, or at least updating the books I have out there. So I'm going to do Wednesday, Friday on neighborhood news.
Okay.
At noon. It's sort of like we did. We kind of cut our schedule back to once a week.
Right.
And I'll do twice a week on neighborhood news starting tomorrow at noon.
When you do it 3 times a week, it's like it takes half your week away.
Yeah. I mean, my whole day, beginning at 3 or 4 a.m. all the way to showtime, is getting ready for the show.
Right. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you too. And it takes away from writing the book or whatever else you're trying to get done.
And and mentioning books, this is something that I wanted to talk to you about. Is the idea that so we've been doing these Zoom calls and we missed January, so we owe people a couple, or at least the Duke Report owes people a couple of Zoom calls, and I sincerely appreciate your coming on those Zoom calls, George. I do. But one of the things, after doing them for a year, we get on those calls and they kind of turn into a show like this where you and I are talking to each other, and sometimes people ask us questions. But what I was thinking is that maybe what we should, and again, my wife and I have gotten to a point right now where we're barely watching television. We're reading books to each other in the morning, and at night we're reading Cat's Cradle right now at night instead of watching TV. We're reading books, and I think that we really, in order to get your critical thinking skills back, you read a ton of books. Okay. The reason that you know so much of the things that you know is because you've read so many books. And there are so many people who watch this show who like us to tell them. But if we don't start fostering this kind of idea that people need to figure these things out themselves because it enhances their own critical thinking skills, and helps them work out those things in their own lives, that maybe we can help them by turning the Zoom calls into a book club. What do you think about that idea?
I think it's a great idea. I think just like we're doing with the Preparada or with your book, you have Stealth Power, and then you also have your upcoming book. Giving people a preview into the book, it doesn't spoil anything. It makes it better because now I know what I'm getting. It's not a pig in a poke anymore. And now I know, oh gosh, that's going to be Peter talking about these various layers and stratifications of control of these societies, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be about true believers, and it's going to be about controllers, and wow, that's what I want a book about. It's going to be well researched and well referenced. So I think that's good. We should talk more about books. I have a ton of books that I've read, and I could go through rereading them again, and we could talk about them because I think they're all great
books. But the thing is about book clubs is everybody gets something out of it.
Sure.
So basically the basic idea, the book club idea, would be that we pick a book, and what we do is we can give people a list. You can maybe we could start with the book list on the Duke Report, and people could send me. I could put a form up, or we'll figure out what the mechanism is.
We should do the authors. Like Preparado, is teed up because we did the authors. Chris Newby got rescheduled to next week, I think.
Yeah, the 13th, I think. Yeah,
the 13th.
We're going to do Chris Newby on the 13th. Yeah, so and you know what? These people are. I think they're very supportive of it because connecting with an audience when you don't have the New York Times bestseller list is for people who are continuing the narrative, the mainstream establishment narrative. You'll be happy to know, George, that we went to the mountains last weekend and we suffered through the end. My wife read to me while I drove. We suffered through the end of The Last Nazi.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The Stan Pottinger tome, but I'm sorry, it's a tough slog. We put a book down. We got a little way into it. My wife finished it, called the World Sensorium by Oliver Reiser. What a bloviating sack of parrot droppings that guy is. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read it.
No.
This guy is supposed to be. He taught at the University of Pittsburgh, and he's one of these guys who's supposed to be like he's on the level of Aldous Huxley or Bertrand Russell of the Americas. But his ideas, first of all, his writing, he's the only guy that I've ever read that can use like three absolutes in one sentence. We must always, it's like.
My general feeling on books, and I've written the 400 pagers and 500 pagers, but yours is going to be jam packed with references and so forth.
I'm trying to make it. I'm trying to make it readers. What I keep doing is knocking it down.
That's
a
good thing because 254, is a good number, and I always went for 111 because there's most books 111 pages because most books are.
That's a good target.
111, and then there's 50 pages of fluff. And it's really 3 books repeating in various different ways to say that. Mm-hmm. So I say, why not just give the customer the 111 pages they could read in 1 hour on a domestic plane flight?
Well, that's why this is such a great book for most people, because he took a 450 page book and he made it 100 pages.
Yeah.
So he cut all, and this was his baby. He cut all the fluff out of it. And that's basically what I'm doing right now. I've written this book 5 times, but I want people to read it. I don't want people to buy it and put it on the shelf and say, oh, I got Peter Duke's book. I want this to actually be a valuable and useful tool to people. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I will figure out a way to solicit I'll send an email out to the members of the Duke Report, and I'll ask them what book we'll come up with a list, what book they want to talk about, and then we can, again, I like your idea, because if we pick this book, if we pick The Incubation of Nazism, we can probably get Guido to come on the Zoom call. If we pick Bitten, we can probably get Chris Newby to go on that call. So I think those are really, really good ideas, George. But I think
and also the group of people that, because Peter Duke has this ability to do the illustrated versions, with AI, and that adds a whole new dimension to these books that, because those are the zingers that stay with you. Those mental images of roads, with 1 foot on Cairo and 1 foot on Cape Town. I really believe in those, because those are kind of like sky hooks that you can say, oh, I read that book, and that was about the round table.
They cement the ideas. They give you it's in hypnosis. It's called an anchor. They give you an anchor, and you can attach to it. Okay, so let's quickly go through here. Hamish said, George, do you find it curious timing the announcement of King Charlie's cancer?
Yeah, I don't think they want him around. I mean, I think if you want to talk about Milner's Roundtable, it still exists, I think, in England. And I do think there is a sort of Knights of Malta kind of club, if you will, in England that wants wants William. It's a photogenic family. There's none of the Diana stuff. All that stuff goes away. If Prince Charles goes away, he's got the bad reputation. Nobody likes him. He's kind of sourpuss to begin with. He's not very photogenic. I mean, just a million things that, although I love him as a reader, he's got a great reading voice, but he's never brought that out. But William has got the little babies, and he's got the pretty wife, and he's got all that thing. And then you have the counterplay with Harry.
Are you saying it's a TV show, George?
Well, it might be. I mean, The Royals is a better TV show with Harry versus William. Contrived or not, it's more interesting because all the women are gorgeous and all the babies are beautiful, and all the both of the guys are still relatively young, and they were both military, and they wear the uniform well when they troop the color and whatnot. It's a much better show than Charles, even though Charles had a military background. Not a lot of people know about it. And the Diana thing, because she was on the People magazine so many times, it just dominates. People can't get beyond the Diana thing. And And I think
he had the same problem with her that Hitler had with Rommel. Rommel became a media darling, and Hitler was always looking over his shoulder at Rommel, going, "Are they going to bump me off and move this guy in?" And it's interesting too about the cancer, because I was just watching something about the War of the Spanish Succession, and it was King Louis XIV was trying to. He was trying, again, this is the Mackinder thing. He was trying to get France and Spain, the War of Spanish Succession. They trying to put France and Spain together to control that whole block. And in the middle of the war, his son and all of his heirs started dying of weird diseases. I think his son died of smallpox when he had already had smallpox when he was a kid. So he wasn't supposed to get smallpox again. So, you look at, was it Queen Anne, who had 17 miscarriages and could never produce an heir? There is this methodology that seems to be in place where if there's a royal that isn't going to serve the establishment's needs, then they throw them into the volcano. It's basically what happens.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's my off the cuff answer for the King Charles's cancer.
Okay, so Vilma Betancourt supporter says, this is the one time I hope you're wrong, Mr. Duke. I'm voting for Trump in the South Carolina primary on the 24th. Vilma, I say this from the bottom of my heart. I want to be wrong. I 100% want to be wrong. It's just that, I've been following George for 6 years, and I'm looking at the metadata, and I'm reading the books, and I'm looking at the history, and I'm looking at what the World Economic Forum says they want to do. I'm looking at Nicholas Bergruen, who's having a meeting right now while I'm talking to you about planning the new government of California. And I can't ignore that. He's meeting with the Pope. He's meeting with Henry Kissinger. Let me bring up I think I might even have this document up. I was looking at it before I window.
There's another user of BlackBerries, by the way, is the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. Just saying. When there's a great reset and you need a clockwork WEF,
right.
You could do no better than the BlackBerry server.
So this was his, Lauren Brown sent me this last night, and I just got to wait for my computer. Here we go. I think this is it. And I will share this. So I want to be wrong. Peter Duke wants to be wrong.
And I wouldn't be writing a whole bunch of stuff for the 24th to be in Michigan 3 days before the Michigan primary and doing all the stumping and doing all the traveling if I didn't believe in the dream as well. I think we're both on the same wavelength, just with different points of perspective, that we want this to be true and we want to save it.
Right. So I got this off the Internet Archive, and I will put this up on the Duke Report, but this is the Bergruen Institute Ideas for a Changing World Conference from 2023. And there's Nicholas Bergruen there. It's not really high res, but I'll just go through the pictures here quickly, because there is Reid Hoffman. There's Eric Schmidt. There is, I don't know who this guy is, Bijan Zwang, and Mohammed Abraham. I don't know who that is, but let me see. Blow this up a little bit. Is that Ariana Huffington? It looks like.
Reid Hoffman is the new Steve Kirsch. He's the new funnel, the money.
But Reid Hoffman is also, I think, the chairman of the board. Isn't he LinkedIn or Salesforce?
CEO, LinkedIn, yeah.
LinkedIn. One of them is, okay, so here's Ariana Huffington, but wait, it gets better because, oh yeah, here we go. This was last year. There's Nicholas Bergruen standing next to his good buddy Henry Kissinger. There's Eric Schmidt. They're and they're meeting at the Carlisle Hotel. They're meeting at the Carlisle Hotel, which is the cover story.
Greenberg Trauig and Jack Abramoff. There you
Look,
go.
there's Nicholas Berggruen and Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I
Well,
don't know.
to me, Peter, this is just the Teapot Dome scandal. 100 years later, California has so many resources. If we could just pull that off and keep that for ourselves and let the United States worry about the rest of its stuff, and Gavin Newsom will be the president.
Yeah. Somebody said, what was the font used for Surge called? I don't know. I think
Would it be great if there was a whole new font called Surge?
well, there was a graphic designer at GameWorks who is now the lead graphic designer for Disney. He's been the lead graphic designer at Disney ever since GameWorks imploded, and he went back to Disney. A guy named Owen Yoshino, and Owen Yoshino is the most talented graphic designer in the world, and he might have designed the Surge font. Owen is the kind of guy, like, my boss would come in and say, hey, I need a logo for this. And Owen would sit there in an hour. He would put together 100 different variations on a logo. I'm not exaggerating. In an hour, Owen could blow out 100 of them. And I'd look over Owen's shoulder when he was doing this stuff, and I go, which one do you like the best? And he goes, it doesn't matter. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, if I thought about which one I liked better, I couldn't do 100 in an hour. I just have to spit them out as fast as I can do them, and it's somebody else's job to pick it. And his work ethic was just unbelievable. All right, here we go. Peter and George, have you heard of Arthur Butts and his 1976 revisionist book? He has added new editions as recently as the 2020s. Don't see the book on your site. Never heard of him before. Send me a link or send something. Contact at thedukereport.com. I have a list. I'm probably 100 books behind right now of books that I want to put up on the Duke Report. But, if you're passing me, let me know if you want to help me put books up on the Duke Report. Because I think
I think the title of his book is called The Hoax of the 20th Century, and I think a big part of it's Nazi Germany. So that's the little thumbnail or the fingernail of the thumbnail sketch at this point.
And we'll put it up. But, at a certain point, I mean, what I've been working on is the idea that the history is the history, okay? And there's a lot of people who say it's the Jews. There's a lot of people who say it's the communists. There's a lot of people who say that it's the Anglo-American establishment. And the truth is it's all of them, because they're all kind of part, Shiva was right when he calls it the swarm. I found it refreshing when I said to Guido Preparata yesterday, when I asked him whether or not the banks were running everything, and he said everybody's got a boss. The bankers, they're running a lot of things. They all have bosses. They're the princes, he called them, but they're not the king. And so, I'm down with it. I think I famously said that if you wanted to find out who controls the world, put Larry Fink in Guantanamo, and he'll tell you.
That's one way to get it.
Exactly. JPTG3 says, read the 1935 naval agreement between England and Germany. And the 1935 naval agreement between England and Germany is in this book. And it's in Conjuring Hitler. It's in both these books. So it's covered. Read this book.
How about that?
How about that?
Bang.
How
said, much is that book? Could you bring us? I mean,
I'm happy to do that. Let's go to Amazon.
Because when an author sees a little bit of a bump from his appearance, it's kind of like, hey, I should do another one of them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our way of bringing them back.
Well, George, I think that you're onto something. Like if we did a show with an author every week, or did a Zoom. I mean, we could do it too. Here it is. There's a couple of different.
I mean, I like the idea of a general show so everybody can see it, because a lot of people don't know about the books. Chris Milligan with Trying Day. We promoted a lot of his books. We promoted a lot of the books, Jeff Prather's book, Dan Hopsker's book, Wayne Madsen, even though I didn't agree with them. There it is.
Yeah, well, but Hopsker's book was $60 or something. It was like, I mean.
Yeah, we got that we got that down. We bought a whole bunch of them, and
Okay, $15.
okay,
but it's not on Kindle.
I know.
To your point,
This is a small book that you can read quickly and then mark it up.
It is, and it's again, it's really a 100-page book, and it's got 4 or 5 different graphs and charts in it. So I highly recommend this book, and it's $15. I did talk to him. It's $50 Australian in Australia, and he's going to figure out why it's too expensive, because he doesn't want it to be that expensive in Australia. So there's that. All right. JBTG73 G says the naval agreement was what Chamberlain had in his hand in his famous newsreel.
I thought he had the
from Munich. The Munich agreement is what he held up.
Oh, I'm talking about the one he had in Prague.
Oh,
outside the airplane with that. I think there's 2 different agreements here.
Right. Well, one of the arguments that Preparado makes in this book about the German naval treaty of 1935 is that if the Germans ever thought that they wanted to actually go up against the British, that they wouldn't have settled for having a navy that was limited to be 1/3 the size of the British Navy, and they would have built out to that limit. That is, even though they built the Tirpitz and the Bismarck and the Prinzeugen and the Graf Spee, even though they built all of those ships, they didn't even come close to the 1/3 of the British ships that they were allowed to build. And Preparata makes a really good case in this book that Hitler didn't ever think that he was going to have to fight the British. He thought they were giving him money. They were providing arms. They were providing. George talks about the tetraethyl lead that came from the Americans. The Wall Street City of London establishment was 100% behind Hitler. Like he would not have become Hitler without their support. So he didn't think that he was going to have to fight them.
And really, they were in the same royal family at that time. The Saxe-Coburg family is the real name of the Winchesters. I mean, it's German. They changed it after World War I. It was a German name. There was a lot of family members that went back and forth in the same family. Queen Victoria was all brothers and sisters with the Kaiser and so forth. So it probably would surprise Hitler that only one generation later here, they're going to get the double cross.
Right. All right. So Zaganostra says, I'm in on the book club. Okay. So Jessica and I will sit down and we will figure out how to organize that. And then we'll check with George and we'll figure that out. Spot the Goat says Michener's Poland is a great read right now. I don't know. I've
read that book. It's a great, even though it's historical fiction, he puts so much fact in. It's so good.
Well, speaking of historical fiction, we finished The Witness Tree, which you can only get as a Kindle book, I think. And that book is really fascinating. The contention in that book is that John Foster and Alan killed Eleanor's husband, and she didn't know it until Mossad let her know, and that they used that information in order to manipulate her into pulling out microfiche records from the State Department that would incriminate Nelson Rockefeller. And then Mossad blackmailed Nelson Rockefeller into giving Israel the votes by using all of his connections in South America to create the State of Israel. So I've spoiled the book for everyone, but it's a
no. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of stuff in that book that's very interesting and thought provoking. Yeah, I think it's a good read. It's a fun read. It's a very fun read because there's a little bit of speculation, which I like because it's kind of like Sherlock Holmes' working theory.
Yeah,
it's like it could have went this way or could have went this way. It could have been coercion to have the Jews not go after the Nazis, brokered by Rockefeller, or it could have been more of a negotiation, so which is it? And so there's a lot of good historical posits, if you will, in that book. I think it's a very creative book.
Yeah, it is. And Temple City Underground, I think that we may be in violent agreement here, actually. He said, Peter pissed me off today. He says Trump should destroy the banking system for us when he couldn't even get a citizenship question on the census. Okay, this is a purity test. I see. I say yes to both. Look, I can make you a list as long as my arm of things that Trump said that he was going to do when he got elected the first time, and then he didn't do it. Okay, I think that our getting mad at each other for this kind of a disagreement is kind of dumb, because I don't think he's going to be president. And I'm sorry, Velma. I'm sorry. I just don't think he's going to be president again. And I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong about that. So let's figure out ways to work together. Let's figure out ways to agree on things. I think that my guess is Temple City Underground is that if we sat down and we went through things issues by issues, we probably agree. So don't get mad. Get even. No.
I think you guys would be fast friends and probably buttering each other's bread by the end of the meal.
Indeed. Joan says, maybe we could analyze books and find ways to infograph them, ways to make them easy and easily parsable for people and actions to take out tasks. 100%. I would love to show people how I made stealth power and the illusion of democracy. I didn't do that.
Well, I'll just say, while Peter's being interrupted by Twitter or whatever, that's what I try to do with my books. I try to do a condensate, a derivative condensate of books that I do a treatment on, which
right. And I was talking to Guido yesterday about his book, the one that that McMillan has got all tied up. I said maybe you should just do a Reader's Digest version of that book, and I can show you how to use GPT to do it in a day. You know, if you've got the Word document that you use to write the book, it's kind of cake. There's some tricks, but it's so yes, not only yes, hell yes. So to that, and last, let's see, speculative question from what? How many U.S. Special Forces are in Poland right now? There's U.S. Special Forces probably in every country of the world right now, is my answer.
I guess 3,000.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a top secret, so I wouldn't know. I do know, going through Poland, there was a lot of, they're using Poland's NATO presence as the big threat, as the deal breaker or the tiebreaker in Ukraine.
I just wanted to say one thing before we go, George, and that is that we can spend a lot of time looking at history, and I'm glad that we do, and I'm glad that we know the history that we know. And for people who want to catch up, I think it's a good exercise. But I think that we are at the point right now where we need to figure out what we're really going to do, and we need to be able to do it with the blinders off, with our ability to take a look at the world the way that it is, not the way that we want it to be. And a lot of that has to do with language and understanding. I was talking to one of the things that I bonded with really hard with Guido yesterday is that he started going off about how the Greek classics are overrated. And I'm so down with that at this point. I started rereading The Republic the other day, and it's one dichotomy built on top of another, which I understand now is a psychological warfare hypnosis technique. So you can read Plato and you can get a lot out of Plato, but if you understand that what you're reading is a hypnotic induction, then your analysis of it is completely different than if you're holding this guy up as somebody who is smarter than you are, who knows more than you do, and has something to teach you that you might not know. I'm not saying that I assume that I'm smarter than Plato, but when I look at the way that the words are constructed on the page, I have great questions now that I didn't have before. So we really need to start understanding how words are used as weapons in order to frame our reality, and that we need to start coming up with things that we can actually do because as long as they got us on the hamster wheel, we're on the hamster wheel, and we're not actually out of the cage doing something. So that's my editorial
well put
note. So if you want to support George Webb, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/GeorgeWebb1, no E, or you can go subscribe to George's Substack at georgewebb.substack.com. georgewebb.substack.com. I got that correct. And then if you want to support the Duke Report, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report, or you can buy my book, which is Stealth Power and the Illusion of Democracy, which is linked at the top of the Duke Report. And if you've bought the book and you've read the book, it would be fantastic. It would be great. It would be the biggest godsend to me possible if you could go write a review of the book, because as long as you keep writing reviews on this books, they keep growing in their popularity on Amazon. So that's something that you can do. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to, figure out how to put your credit card number into something. You can just go on to Amazon. You can leave a review. That would be great. And if you want to buy a shirt that's even edgier, then I was listening to Luke Rudkowski today, and he has a website called thebestpoliticalshirts.com. And I was thinking that I should probably create a t-shirt store called the bestpoliticsareFake-t-shirts.com or something like that. But
I got somebody gave me a pretty good sweatshirt.
Michigan beat everybody. All right.
I've been wearing that all over Las Vegas. Everybody's looking at me. And then
what do your teammates from Ohio think, George, when you wear that stuff?
Miami of Ohio is not Ohio State, and anybody who hates Ohio State is my friend.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, George, I will see you next Tuesday, and we'll organize a Zoom call, and I'll talk to you about that later.
Sounds great. Thanks, Peter, for a great show.
All right, and thank you, and go check out the Nicholas Bergruen Zoom call. Talk to you later. Bye.